Right, today I'm going to be talking about monoculars, you know, like binoculars, but just with the one lens. Now, this all started off by looking for some binoculars. In fact, I was recently on a cruise, on a week up the Norwegian fjords. There'd be loads of nice scenery to see. I thought it'd be nice to take along a set of binoculars with me. I'd bought some years ago, but I couldn't find them. So while I was on the Japanese auction sites looking for something else, I saw some lovely new old stock Olympus binoculars. They are a really beautiful thing. I think these might date back to the 1980s. There's definitely a feeling of quality about the construction that is rare to find nowadays. The full metal body provides a solid feeling of quality. The design is very unusual, with its flat front covered by a single piece of glass, but despite the fixed width case, they do feature interocular as well as diopter adjustments. But with such an unusual design, I suspect that these didn't appeal to the traditional binocular buyer, but they certainly appeal to me. They are, of course, designed more as modern-day opera glasses for taking to concerts rather than for bird watching. Oh, and they do come with a really nice little case that slips neatly in the pocket. There was just one issue with these, though. I mean, they look a bit odd. I like that. I think they look cool. They look a bit kind of Star Trek mixed with something that perhaps James Bond would stick inside his pocket. But yeah, really cool little object. Beautiful. Can't use them because I look through them and I see a double image. And it isn't a fault of these. I later discovered when I tried some other binoculars out that the issue wasn't the binoculars, particularly the individual ones, it was my eyes. I have a fault with my right eye. A number of years ago I got an infection in the macula, and as a result I can't see out of the centre of it. I have very poor vision in it. In fact, I'd probably be registered blind if both eyes were like this, because the centre part is just grey and I can see peripheral vision, but if I look towards where that peripheral vision is, then that part's grey. So I think the issue is when I'm looking normally, I can sort of compensate for it. When I look through binoculars, I can't, because my eye hasn't got used to them, so it sees everything with a double vision, which means I can't really use binoculars. Now, I suppose I could close the right eye and still use the binoculars, but I don't find that comfortable to do for prolonged periods of time, or even more than just a few seconds. So I changed my search. I thought, well, since I can only use one eye anyway, I might as well start looking for a monocular. And here's the one that I decided upon. This is the Nikon Monocular 2 Metallic 6x15. By the way, if I'm supposed to say 6 times 15, just translate that in your head. You know exactly what I mean. Don't let that metallic name fool you, though. It's just referring to the colour. This is an all-plastic bodied device. As a result of that, it is quite lightweight, which is, of course, a positive thing, but it does feel well constructed. It was made in Japan. It's got nice rounded edges. It has the ability, with the flip of the front assembly, to become a 9 times close-up magnifier. Now, that's not something I'll ever need, but it's there if you do. However, most importantly, it does have pin-sharp optics. And I found that this worked perfectly for me. Of course, you've got to take your glasses off to see through it, but you can use this either way up, it doesn't matter. So it's easy for me to just hold it like this in front of the working eye. This hand is blocking the eye that I can't see out of properly, and I get a nice sharp image. I don't have to close this eye either. So it's a perfect little solution. Does exactly what I wanted it to do. Now, this isn't my first experience with a monocular. A few years ago, I picked up the Canon PowerShot Zoom. This is a digital monocular and camera capable of 12 megapixel stills and 1080p HD video recording. It features optical image stabilization. It's got 3 fixed levels of zoom and offers Bluetooth and Wi-Fi for connecting up with a phone app. The OLED viewfinder has 2.36 million dots. Now, the idea behind this doesn't sound too bad. You've got a monocular, it's quite nice and pocket-sized. You can zoom in on distant objects. If you want, you can take photos and video of those as well. Admittedly, the video is only HD 1080p. However, you know, better than nothing, I suppose. The problem is when you're using it as a monocular, it's not as good as a regular optical one because it's got an EVF in this. So instead of just looking at a scene, it's a certain brightness, you bring up your optical monocular, it's the same brightness through that. When you bring this up, you're looking at an EVF, it's much darker. So your eye takes a little bit of time to adjust to that. And then you take it away and it takes time to adjust back again. And that gets old pretty quickly. It's a little bit like walking out of a cinema from a matinee performance and suddenly you've got all the bright sun outside. It takes you a little bit of time to get used to it. But in addition to that, to look through this, you've got to turn it on, which takes like a couple of seconds. You've got to charge it up. It's got a 70-minute battery life. I think the fact also that you're focusing with your eye on something here rather than all the way over there makes a little bit of difference as well. So really it doesn't work well as anything. It kind of falls between two stools. If I want to see distant objects with clarity without recording, just use a regular optical binocular. If I want to record distant objects with a zoom in, well, I'd rather use something like my Sony HX99, which has a much greater zoom and much more flexibility, and of course records in 4K. Now, just before I went on the cruise with the new Nikon, I was recommended to try out the Minox Monocular as an alternative. This one came in 6x or 8x magnification. I bought the 8 times, so I had a different level of zoom to the 6 times Nikon. The Minox has a squared off metal body that's reminiscent of their spy cameras. It's a lovely little jewel of a device that focuses with the use of a slider rather than a wheel. And of course I took this one on holiday as well. Now, over the course of the week, the Monocular proved to be a surprise hit with the missus. She's never been able to get along with using binoculars. She enjoyed using this. I think one thing that I realised that I didn't know before or didn't think about was the fact that binoculars are very difficult things to share between two people, because you get them set up for your own eyes. You adjust the interocular to fit your head. You adjust the diopter to adjust for your prescription, your eye differences, and then you get your focus right, and then you pass it to someone and say, oh, hold on, well, look at that over there, and then oh, right, hold on, I'll adjust this, oh, yeah, I can see it now, right, I'll pass it back to you, and then you adjust it all back again. It's inconvenient. Whereas with a monocular, when you look through one of these, you might just have to refocus it a little bit, but you'd probably be doing that anyway. Your finger's always on this thing, just adjusting for the distance of things. And it's just a dead easy thing to pass between two people. And of course it's really pocket-sized as well, which is incredibly handy. But yeah, the Monocular proved to be a big hit with the missus, and I was surprised by that, although it was the Nikon that she liked rather than the one from Minox. Now, the big problem that I've struggled with when it comes to making a video about monoculars is that you can't see what I can see through this. It's easy enough with one of these Canon devices because I can show you the video that this thing's recorded. In fact, let's do just that. So each press of the zoom button jumps between 3 different levels of magnification. You can't do a smooth zoom. Now, the first 2 options are optical. The third one is a digital zoom. You can't turn off the digital zoom, which is unfortunate, as I prefer if you could just switch between those 2 optical modes. But you have to jump past that digital one to get back to the beginning every time. You'll see that the footage is rather shaky despite the inbuilt optical stabilization, and this is with me trying to hold it as steady as possible. But now let's get back to the 2 traditional binoculars. I'll explain how I'm going to give you an idea as to the level of zoom and the field of view that's offered by both. I've got the Nikon here in this monopod at the moment, and I'm lining it up with a church opposite me, and then I'm going to swap that out with my zoom camera, zoom into the same area, and then I'll show you that. So that gives you an idea as to the field of view of one of these. Of course, you're not getting the optics, but at least you're getting an idea as to what you can see through each of these and how much things are zoomed in. So we'll start off with the Nikon. Okay, so what you're looking at on screen now is pretty much bang on what I could see through this Nikon. Now, this is a 6x. We're going to swap it out, and in its place, we're going to use the Minox, and that is an 8x, so therefore it should get a little bit closer. Yes, I'm pretty confident now that I've got this to show the same field of view that I was seeing through my eye with the Minox as well. And it is noticeably more zoomed in than the Nikon. However, the view is different. The Nikon is a round view, whereas this goes out more towards the edges of the frame. And I think that might be perhaps the reason I didn't notice too much difference between the 2 when I was on holiday. I think there's one last thing I should do while I've got this here in front of me now. I'm going to show you what this can see from one end of the zoom range through to the other, so that you can get an idea as to the extra zoom that you can get out of this Sony HX99 camera. Unfortunately, this is now a discontinued model, but I'm sure there are other super zooms that you can get that would do a similar thing, although in in a pocket size, I'm not too sure there are that many still on the market. So if you want one of these, you might still find some old stock somewhere. I do recommend it as a pocket zoom camera. I think it's really quite good, and it's a shame they discontinued it. Right, and now finally the Canon. Now this is a funny old thing. It's got 3 set zoom ranges. The first one, when you switch it on, that says at the bottom 100mm. I'm seeing through there roughly the same thing I'm seeing out my windscreen of the car. I mean, there's very little difference in it. I think maybe if I was to move my car one space further forward, it would probably be the same as looking through that. But you know what, it could be almost identical. The difference is, though, I'm getting a much narrower field of view than I'm getting just sitting here looking in front of me. It's like looking through a toilet roll tube, perhaps. Okay, so that's the first one, toilet roll tube. The second one, you press zoom and it moves in, it says 400mm. Now that is a fair amount of zoom, and it's stabilised. And you know what, it doesn't look too bad through this. I could be convinced this was a good thing if I saw it in a shop, but handheld outside with the sun on you, I found that a little bit difficult to use. And honestly, I'd rather use one of the optical ones, because looking at a screen on this, you're getting a lower resolution. You are just looking with your eyes. The third option, the third zoom, well, that one says 800mm, but it's just digital. It's just cropping in on the previous image. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this. As I said before, with the Zoom Sony compact camera, that gets you a really good zoom, stabilised. A compact zoom camera for the pocket, if you want to take anything, is much better than this. But really, this video is more about your optical monoculars. And out of those two, well, I'll tell you which one I prefer. Okay, well, which one of these two is my favourite? It might surprise you. The Minox, to start with. I love the build quality. It feels like something from a different era. This metal body, pleasingly weighted but not too heavy. I like this mechanism at the back here for the neck strap. It stops the strap getting tangled because the ends on that rotate. Just very well constructed. The lens with its wider angle might be more pleasing to some than the rounder image of the Nikon. But the thing that lets this one down is this focusing mechanism. That's focused all the way to one side, that's all the way to the other. So any adjustment on this is tiny, and whilst it's a nice little idea that you could just look through one eye and focus it very easily like so, the problem with that is you just move it a tiny little bit and it's out of focus. And I found when I was looking through this, it was out of focus more often than not. Even when I try and adjust it, I'd take my thumb off it and I'd knock the focus out again. It's just microscopic movements on this make all the difference. Whereas on the Nikon, yeah, plastic body, doesn't feel anything like the quality of the Minox. Surprisingly expensive, these, when you consider the construction of it. It really doesn't seem like it's all that, but I think the optics on this are very good. And the main positive is the focusing wheel, because it's just all the way to one side like that, all the way to the other like so. That's the closest focusing distance. You see this part popping out. So you tend to be more in this kind of area, and you're just doing movements, perhaps half a turn, quarter of a turn, but it's enough to get things pin sharp, and it stays there. It's got a nice dampened feel to it. So it's a lot easier to focus this one than the other. And after all, you're getting a monocular so you can see things through it. And it's more difficult for me to see things clearly through the Minox than it is through the Nikon. Now, these two I've shown you, it turns out they're both discontinued. I end up buying new old stock without realising it. I just like the look of this one. Turns out they don't make it anymore, and I don't think they have for quite a long time. This one, I'm not sure when it was discontinued either. You can find the Nikons a little bit easier though. If you go searching for this, you'll spot quite a few still for sale. These are a little bit harder to come by. However, there is another company that are selling what looks like pretty much this same design, but in a black rubberized case. However, you're still going to have the issue of the ultra-sensitive focusing mechanism. So perhaps not one that I'd recommend from my own experience, but I do know that some people really like this one. I can't vouch for the quality of the Lookalike, but it is coming from a respectable manufacturer, so it might well just be the same thing repackaged. But of course there are loads of no-name cheaper monoculars that you can find online, and indeed I picked one of these up from Amazon just to see how good or bad they are, and I don't think it will come as any surprise that this thing isn't very good at all. It supposedly offers a 7 to 21 times zoom, but the quality of the optics is very low, very soft image, blurs off towards the edges, very narrow field of view as well. It's pretty hard to get anything in focus with this. I really wouldn't recommend it. I'd suggest rather not buying one at all rather than getting a cheap one, because something like this would put you off the whole idea. You'd look through one of these and say, well, those things are rubbish, I don't want one of those. Whereas if you were to spend a bit more, you'd find they are really quite good. So yeah, don't get yourself a cheap monocular. Get one from a reputable manufacturer, a company that knows lenses. And I'd also suggest not getting too hung up on the zoom. This doing 7 to 21 isn't much point, because you get such a narrow field of view at 21, and the shake out of your hand makes it barely viewable. So yeah, I'd stick to a more normal 5, 6, 7 times magnification on them. But there is still a monocular that's being sold by Nikon. As I mentioned earlier, this one appears to be discontinued. This cost me around about $100 US, around about £80 to import. Still new old stock available if you search around. But if you want to get a new one that's currently being made, it's a model that they've made since 1999 in Japan. It's got a 7x15, and in the UK they're selling it for £279. So clearly it's a higher grade model than the one I've got here, but looking at reviews of it, everyone was very impressed with it, and I get the feeling it's going to be discontinued soon as well. I mean, how many products from 1999 are still on the market? So yeah, I've decided to go and get one of those as well. Again, rather than paying the full price, importing it from Japan, and it's going to work out at around about £100 off the UK price. And then I'm going to keep that for the rest of my life, I'm quite sure. If you've got a decent monocular in your pocket, when you're going to visit an art gallery or a stately home, museum, cathedral, you want to zoom in on that stained glass window or look at that artwork that's all the way across and you can't get to. Great little things to have in your pocket. And that's really more the kind of thing that they're designed for than sitting on a cruise ship looking at scenery go by, but they work just as well for that. It's just a useful little gadget to carry around with you. And yeah, I mean, you can use your mobile phone, you can zoom in on things, but honestly, looking at something optically is a lot different to looking at it on your screen, as I'm quite sure you know. So yeah, having one of these in your pocket is a little bit like having a bionic eye ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Anyway, that's it for the moment. Wait, stop the press. This arrived today, FedEx parcel with the new monocular in. So let's just have a quick look at this. And I say this is the model that's been manufactured since 1999. So this is a 7x15. Lovely little leather case, or pleather case, can't tell you exactly which, but Nikon logo on the front there. Oh, this is a nice thing. This is metal bodied, and this one all just focuses with this end part here, which goes in and out. I'll have a quick look through this one. And oh yeah, there we go. I've got posters on the wall there, and I can read the text on them, which I can't with my glasses. So yeah, I'm probably going to hopefully have this for the rest of my days, and I'm going to look after it. I've got links in the video description, eBay links, you know, that'll search for it for you. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.